I'm stood near the top of probably one of the most famous mountain bike trails in the area. And in the summer months, this hill is absolutely buzzing with riders. However, from the months of say October till March, this hill is like a ghost town. And there's a reason for that, is because the trail is one of the most slippery, treacherous and humiliating trails in the area. We're talking wet off cambers. Let's go and have a look at the detail of this hill and how to ride it, or how not to. Now, when it comes to tyre pressures and suspension when you're tackling off cambers, there's two different schools of thought. When it comes to the tyres, then some people tend to think that a higher tyre pressure is better so that the tyre digs into those onto those angles. Now, I think it depends on the underlying soil conditions. If you've got, say, like some deep earth or mud, then I think you can get away with a harder tyre pressure, whereas if the ground conditions are hard pack, where there's a really thin layer of mud, then you definitely need to go down on the tyre pressures, down to around 20 psi for a normal tyre. And the same applies to suspension setup. And again, two different ways of thought on this is a harder suspension setup means that you're going to dig in easier and there's not so much kind of pitching with the bike. However, you will find that a softer suspension setup, not too much, will give you a little bit more traction when you encounter rocks and roots as you're traversing the off cambers. Now, pedals is quite an interesting one because the steeper the gradient, the steeper the camber, the more likely it is that you're going to be dabbing your way down the hill. And I reckon that flat pedals on off cambers are essential. If you can ride down off camber clipped in, then you're one hell of a skillful rider. All right, let's start off with quite a basic, gentle off camber. We're looking at about, what, 30 degrees here, adverse. Three things to think about before you even tackle these cambers. First thing is momentum. You definitely need some speed to get across those cambers. Otherwise, you're just going to get hooked up in rocks and roots you encounter as you go across them. The second thing is mindset. You have to believe that you're going to get across there. Otherwise, the minute you start looking into the ground for any kind of obstacles along the way, you're done. Forget it. And the third thing is braking. You really need to avoid to brake when it comes to going across the cambers. If you are going to brake, back brake only, otherwise that front brake is just going to wash out and get you sliding down the hill. Now, sometimes it's actually not the mud that's going to get you off, it's actually the roots that you encounter along the way. You can see that's almost like a 45 angle on that route, and there's 1, there's 2, 3, 4, 5. You start hitting them and you're going to get bounced off, so you need to, that's where momentum comes into play to get yourself across that camber. Now, this is quite interesting. You'll see on this 2-foot wide section of track, you've got the scuffed out smooth area on my side here, whereas on this side it's a lot more made up of loose sticks and leaves and such matter. So you're going to get a load more grip and traction in this area than you are in this kind of scuffed out area here. Now, you'll actually see a lot of World Cup downhill riders, they'll save this estate here until their actual final run of their race because they know they'll get traction in these areas. Now, this is a typical section of track you'll find anywhere in the world. You've got an inside line which is super smooth, probably the Sam Hill line, and then you've got to catch a real kind of trough at the bottom of the track. Now, that is going to be the safest place every time when you're riding off camber. So if you haven't got the confidence, aim for those catch points to take you to the next section. So I mentioned earlier about the importance of having correct rubber on your bike when tackling wet cambers. Now, look at this back tyre. We're 200 meters into the track, and even though it's got an aggressive tread pattern, you can see the build-up of mud there, which makes it more like a dry weather tyre. So the good thing is, when I get to the next section of track, that's going to clear the knobs. You can enable it the next section to bite in. Now, a lot of the time you'll see in videos that, particularly on cambers, the bike will be leaning into the slope and the rider will be leaning away from the slope. And there's a simple reason for this. It's because you need to get as much weight as possible on the biting inside edge of the tyre. And what you're trying to do is actually get a vertical rider profile when you're going to cross, so that it's actually going straight down into the edge of that tyre. Okay, so here you go, corner on a 45 degree off camber, probably your worst nightmare. How do you deal with it? Well, pretty much luck really. You need to get the big foot out and go for a big old dab, because this is like really, really difficult terrain to deal with. Let's give it a go. So this is a really intense situation. There's all the elements when it comes to off cambers. You've got a 45-degree bank where there's no grip whatsoever, not for braking or indeed for changing line. Now when it comes to line choice, it's really important here. You have a really smooth inside line or an outside line which nobody's used, which has got more mulch in it and more sticks, which are going to give you traction in a situation like this. Now the second thing is mindset. On the inside line there's a tree there. That's really going to mess with your confidence. So that's why it's really important to commit to this outside line from early on. And finally, there's the catch, that kind of catch berm, which is your safety net, which means that ultimately you're going to be pretty much out of control in a situation like this. There's no grip and you're kind of at the mercy of the elements really. So you need to be aiming for that exit, not only to catch you, but to take you on to the next section. And finally, my number one tip when it comes to tackling cambers is keep straight lines. So you should be looking to get from this point to this point in one crisp, clean movement. Don't go around anything, go straight over everything. It focuses the mind and it gets you to that next point. So here we are in the safety of nice dry rocks, but then anybody can ride dry rocks. Wet off cambers are really, really difficult. So be committed, be confident. If you do get the skill, it's a really good one to have because it'll put you in good stead for other kind of mountain bike environments. Hope you like this video. Give us a thumbs up if you do. If you want to see more off the ground action, then my colleague the Don has a good video here, how to do drop-offs. And yeah, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and the button is somewhere around my rear wheel, just by there. Cheers.